Hello and welcome. I'm Geraldine Wilkins, the Living Water Quilter. Welcome to Quilt Conversations Live. Hello, ladies. How are you tonight? How was your week, ladies? Hello, Copper, Sheila. Hello, Marcia. How are you? Lois, Lorraine. Hello, Monica. Welcome back. We missed you last week. Hello, Debbie in British Columbia. Did I forget anyone? Who sewed this week? Guess what? I sewed. I actually made a tote bag. Actually, I made 3 tote bags. Hello, Sherry. How are you? How are you? How are you? It's good to see everyone tonight. I had a pretty busy week. Like I said, I made some tote bags. And I worked on a secret project for Make Modern magazine. Thank you, Marsha. You like my scarf? I love scarves. You did some sewing and unsewing. Okay, I confess, I did some unsewing too. Hello, Terry. Hi, how are you? It's good to see you. What else happened this week? Do you remember about a month ago I told you about a cat that had kittens underneath my porch? And I had a 2 week ordeal trying to catch the mama and the kittens and to bring them to the shelter so they could be adopted. Well, guess what? I had another cat that looked exactly like the same one. I don't even know if it was the same one because we have this rule in Virginia where cats have free roaming privileges. So, but anyway, it looked like the exact same cat. And I thought, not again. And then I saw 2 kittens. And I said, oh no. I said, I don't have time for this. This was about 2 weeks ago. After catching 3 kittens and the mama. Hello, Rosemary. So glad you're here. Wilda. Hello, Wilda. So, anyway, long story short, a couple of days ago, my neighbor was in my front yard sitting in the grass. I said, oh, what you doing? She says, well, I'm trying to catch a kitten. So apparently, this was a second cat with 2 kittens, and she's going to adopt the mama cat and try and catch the kitten to give to a friend. And so we were talking, and then the kitten decided to climb one of my bushes in my front flower bed, and she was able to catch the kitten. So hopefully now the kitten has a new home and I don't have to worry about cats and kittens. Okay, Lois, you made a baby nightgown. All right. And you worked on your snowflake template. Wonderful. Awesome, awesome. Copper cat whisperer. I like cats, please. I love animals. I just don't have the wherewithal to take care of them or the energy. So that was number 2 this week. So tote bags, secret project, kittens, and I don't know, something else happened. Oh, last night. I'm in a semi-rural area. I'm at the end of my street, and so there is a protected waterway behind my home. So it's a passageway for wildlife to run through. So anyway, once in a while I might see a deer, and I've seen turtles and other creatures this New York City girl never encountered other than a zoo. And I won't go into the list of animals that have. Oh, here's one time when I first moved here. I was up early in the morning having my coffee. I wanted to go sit out on the porch. And what do I see when I open my door? I see a cow walking down the road. Hello, Benita. Hello, how are you? All right, all right. you're visiting your parents in Long Island. Oh, wow. That's wonderful, Copper. I'm so glad you're able to visit with them. That's amazing. 92 and 93. That's fantastic. Have a wonderful time with your parents. So, anyway, I had some wildlife adventures. Something must have happened last night between a skunk and some other creature because all of a sudden I can smell this skunk smell. And I'm like, oh no, what is happening? I had to turn off my air conditioning system because it works a certain way so that that skunk smell wouldn't come in the house. So anyway, that tends to happen, Copper. So that was my week. Probably more than you wanted to hear. Oh, and Sherry, that's right. You visited your grandson and wow, and your granddaughter next month. Okay. Wow. Was that a special time? Special time with your grandson and a two and a half year old granddaughter next month you're going to visit. It's wonderful that several of us are going to be able to see family. It's been too long for some of us. So we have a full night tonight, and I'm busy yakking away like we have all afternoon or all evening, depending upon where you live. We are going to look at something that's been on my mind for quite some time, and some of you have commented about it. I'm going to use two quilts to talk about it, but we're going to look at stress-free quilting plan. That's the whole idea. We've talked about quilting plans before, but I want to break it down into my personal 10 steps. I have 10 steps. And I didn't think there were that many until I started to write it down. You might want to get a piece of paper because I want you to write down your 10 steps. Or I should say, whatever steps you have. Maybe you have 5 steps. Maybe you have 15. Maybe you have 8. But get a piece of paper and a pen, and we're going to use these two quilts to talk about the 10 steps. But before we do that, I want to share those 10 steps with you. And part of those 10 steps for a stress-free machine quilting, we kind of do naturally as we've become quilters and we've learned different techniques. But how many of us have really thought about it? Do you have a step-by-step process when you're making a quilt? Think about when you're cooking. Is there a favorite dish that you have? A favorite dish that you like to make and you know the ingredients, you know the order to put them in as you're cooking. You have a whole process, a step-by-step process for making that dessert or that side dish. But we have the same thing with quilting. Over time, we create a series of steps when we are making a quilt. But have we written it down like a recipe? Have we wrote down those steps? So I want to challenge you tonight to get a piece of paper and think about your steps from beginning to end. What are the steps that you take to successfully machine quilt your project? What are the important ingredients to your machine quilting recipe? I'm going to share with you mine. Stress-free, yes, Copper, that's important. Here are my 10 steps. 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting. The first one is your fabric preparation. At least that's mine. You may copy these 10 steps and decide some of them are not necessary for you to make a quilt, Or you might have more steps than me and fill in the gaps. This is the order that I've created after thinking about it and wanting to share it with you. Piecing. How do I piece my quilt? Is my 1/4 inch seam piecing accuracy good? Or do I need to work on that? What about pressing? Am I a decent presser? Am I ironing or am I pressing the fabric? Do I press my seams to the side or open? Your batting selection. What batting do you choose for your quilts? Do you have one go-to pattern for bed quilts and lap quilts? Do you have one for art quilts? What's your batting of choice, and how does that influence your machine quilting? What about basting? Basting your quilt. How do you baste it? Spray based, pin based? Do you use fusible batting? That is important in the machine quilting process. What about the design that you choose, the free motion quilting, ruler quilting, or walking foot quilting design? We talked about this before. We select a design, then we decide how dense we're going to quilt it. Either it's very dense or it's very loose. Then we decide what direction. And then number 8, borders and boundaries. Now that I have chosen my design and I know the density, how dense I want to make it, what are the borders and boundaries that I create within the quilt to help me put that design in the quilt? Next, thread color and weight. What is your process for selecting thread color and thread weight? Or do you have a process? And lastly, practice, practice, practice. All of these steps take time to develop. Think about this for a moment. Of these 10 steps, which ones are your strongest skill? Which one do you really do well? Are you a good piecer and you have accurate 1/4 inch seams? Do you know how to select thread and the color and the weight for every quilt? Does that come easy or is it a challenge? What about your fabric preparation? How do you prepare your fabric? Some just take it right off the bolt and start cutting. Not me, ladies. I have a process for my fabric preparation that helps me successfully quilt my projects. It's one of those important steps. If I don't follow those steps, I have problems when it comes to machine quilting, whether it's walking foot, ruler quilting, or free motion. Okay, stabilizing the quilt. Okay. Monica, I will share a little bit more about that. I guess I did skip over that one. Let me talk about stabilizing. When you have a long arm, there are certain things that you do if it's on a frame to make sure that the quilt is square and straight. Some will tack down the sides of the quilt so it doesn't spread out and it stays square. And they'll tack down the top of the quilt. They might decide that they need to do other things to make sure the quilt doesn't shift. What I mean when I say stabilize, I want to minimize that quilt becoming skewed or the shape of the quilt starts to shift. The square block is no longer square because I stretched it in the quilting process. How do I make sure that doesn't happen? There are a number of things. fabric preparation is part of that. But after fabric preparation, stabilizing happens with thread and stitching in the ditch, or stitching, basting stitches. Some will do that. I don't necessarily do that, but that's an option. But you have to test and see if that option works for you. And that's why I've made this list of 10 things. Which ones do you apply? Which ones are important in your process? Which ones help you get successful, repeatable results? Yes, like starch. Yes, exactly. Hi, Sally. You're right. What is my fabric preparation? I'm sure you want to know. I always, always wash my fabric. It may feel like an extra step or an extra chore, but all you need is one quilt for the fabric to bleed. I want to take those chemicals out of the fabric. I want to wash the fabric, and if it's a batik fabric, I will also use something to fix the dye, something called retain. All my batik fabrics get retain, a dye fixative. And then I starch my fabric, and I mix my own starch. I use Stay Flow. It's a liquid starch that I mix and put in a spray bottle, and I will saturate that fabric. Then I hang it on my drying rack in my second bathroom in the bathtub and let it dry. Then I press, and my fabric is now ready to cut. Hello, Yolanda. Welcome, welcome. You're welcome, Monica. You're welcome. You know, for those of you that are in Stitching Lane Society membership, you know, we're going to meet in a couple of weeks, and we can talk more about this when we have our Zoom meeting, more details. So anyway, I want to make sure that I share with you that there is a process. You might look at my quilts and think, boy, why are her quilts always so flat? How is it that there's not a lot of buckling? Why does the quilting look good? Someone asked that question of me in a Facebook group yesterday. And I briefly said, I have a process, I have steps. And once we have a step, just like that recipe, in that recipe, when you're cooking, you can just do it without thinking that you've done year after year after year. What's your favorite recipe that you can make without even thinking about it? Let me know in the chat. What is a food recipe? It can be a dessert, it could be a main dish, a side dish that you just know how to make. But then there's some of those recipes where you need help, and you go to your cookbook or your recipe card and you pull it out and you look at each ingredient and making sure that you do the right thing, because you only make it maybe once a year or only during holiday times. But if there's a recipe that you make every single month, in 12 months or less, you're not going to need the recipe book or card, because you've done it over and over. It's the same thing with your quilting process, whether it's your piecing process or it's your machine quilting process. Each one of these steps has steps within it. Like my fabric preparation has multiple steps. I've created a system for my fabric preparation that I just do it automatically. I know exactly what I have to do. When I buy fabric, it goes into the laundry area, right on top of the dryer, next to the washing machine. Then when I'm ready to wash, all I have time, I got some fabrics here that are all the same color. Let me wash these fabrics. And then I wash them. And then after they are washed, they're ready for the next stage, and that's starching. And then if I'm not cutting it for a pattern, I may not starch it. I may wait. Or I might start it right away and start cutting, or put it aside for when I'm ready to cut. I have a process. Same thing for basting a quilt. I have a step-by-step process. Look at these 10 steps, see which ones you use in your process. Which ones do you need to work at? Do you, oh, I love retain too. Oh, and Sally, you use stay flow. Fantastic. So you don't dilute it. Always pre-wash. Yes. Great, Monica. The biggest debate in quilting. And you're right in that, because what my 10 steps may not be what you want to do or you have time for. It is your personal preference. And some people, when they cook, they know, man, I got to make a quick dinner tonight. And what is that quick dinner? It can't be a 10-step recipe. It has to be 3 steps or less. So, ladies, I want to encourage you to create your own process. This is my process. The results that you see on the pictures that I share with you of my quilts are the result of that process. And Lorraine uses retain. Yes, Sherry, I pretty much use the same process. I always try and do the same thing. Of course, if it's a smaller quilt, I don't have to necessarily spray baste. I may instead use fusible batting, or it's so small or it's not going to shift and I don't need to do either one, and I won't use a fusible batting or spray base. That might be fine. I might change my batting choice, but the process of what batting works for a particular project is part of my batting process. So remember, there are individual steps under each step. So under batting, I'd have a process for lap quilts, and I might have a very similar process for art quilts with 1 or 2 steps that may be different within that batting selection process. So Sally says that she washes her fabric with my first quilt, but haven't done since. I've never had a problem with bleed, but always wash my quilts. Okay, with Sith and Paul. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. You guys know what she meant. That's her process. I'm just trying to encourage you to choose what works for you, because the more you look at the process, the more consistent you're going to be, the more you're going to feel like you're in control, and the less stress the process is going to be for you. When you know what you're going to do and what tools you need to accomplish that, you enjoy the process. It is less stressful, right? Okay, so speaking about, did I miss any comments here? I'm going to check here. Like starch, okay. All right. All right. Well, since we've been talking about recipes, we're going to play dessert bingo. So get a piece of paper. You should have one already. Yeah, you're right. We normally don't think about it as a process, Sally. It's only when someone talks about it. I mean, we just automatically do it. We have a process for almost everything we do in life. Your morning routine, getting the kids or grandkids ready, or work, or all kinds of things, grocery shopping. Yeah, Monica, it does feel softer and better. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then sometimes In a quilt, if I don't pre-wash a fabric or I want to use spray starch, I did this once before. I was quilting something for someone and I was just thinking about my own process, and I didn't ask them if they pre-washed their fabric. And sometimes if I have a quilt that has a lot of biased edges and I don't want it to shift during quilting, or the piecing is such that there's some give in the fabric and it's has a little bubble, I want to shrink that down, I will spray it with some diluted starch so that it will shrink down and not stretch in the quilting process or create a pleat. And so I sprayed it, and when I did, it hit some red fabric and it started to bleed instantly. Was I in a panic? Yes. So sometimes even after I've starched my fabric, if I feel like maybe my dilution of starch wasn't, because I don't use a measuring cup, I just kind of say, okay, half here and half water, and then I'm good to go. And sometimes I might have a little bit more or less of water or starch, which normally isn't a problem, but sometimes if my quilt needs a little bit more starch after it's pieced, I will spray the back with additional starch. Hello, Liz. Thanks for being here. No, you're not late. So hopefully everyone has a piece of paper. We're going to play dessert bingo. We've been talking about recipes, and I thought just to have a little fun, we can do that. So what you're going to do, okay, I started this wrong. Let's try this one first. Okay, I'm going to cover that. There we go. And play this one first. Okay, so one piece of paper, 4 lines horizontal, three lines horizontal, and 3 lines vertical. And if you have eaten, made, or tasted any of these desserts, you're going to put an X. And to get 4 in a row, vertical, horizontally or diagonally, means you have bingo. So here we go. Actually, before I start, let me know that you're ready. Say ready in the comments for dessert bingo. Piece of paper, 3 lines across, 3 lines vertically, and then you'll have a grid of 4 by 4, and you're going to put an X if you have tasted, made, or eaten this dessert. Ready, Freddy, says Copper. Sally, getting hungry, I know. Probably at the end of bingo, some of you are going to want to have dessert after this live session. All right, here we go. Have you tasted, eaten, or made these desserts? If it's a yes, you put an X. All right, Rosemary's ready, Sally's ready, Lois is ready. Sorbet, have you had that recently? Made it? Tasted it? Ever? You put an X. Tim Tams. Tim Tams, have you had a Tim Tam dessert? Fudge. Fudge, do you like fudge? What about an ice cream sandwich? Okay, who's already thinking about what's in their freezer and fridge for dessert? How about apple pie? A go-to dessert when you're sick. Brownies, brownies. Never heard of Tim Tams. It's a popular dessert in another country. I looked up some desserts from another country. Bingo, Sally. Congratulations, Sally. Wow, that was fast. All right. Flan. Carrot cake. 4 in a row. 4 in a row, Sally. Cheesecake. All right. Flan, Tim Tams, fudge, brownies, ice cream sandwiches, cream pie. All right, Liz. Bingo for Liz. Oh, never mind. Does that mean that, Sally, you are waiting for one more? Okay. Hot fudge sundae. Bingo for Copper. All right. Oh, and Grace. Welcome, Grace. All right. Pudding. Tiramisu. Oh, I love tiramisu. It's my favorite. Bingo for Lorraine. Woohoo! And Jackie has bingo. Welcome, Jackie. So glad you're here. All right. And Sherry, bingo. All right. And Tres Leches. All right. Rosemary, too. All right. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Um, let's see here. How many of you have tried Tim Tams before? Raise your hand. Or know what it is. Someone got Copper. You got all except Tim Tams and Tres Leches. Don't know what they are. Well, maybe that's a homework assignment. Go find out. First row for Terry. Sorbet, carrot cake, cheesecake, and cream pie. Not a fan of flan. I thought that might happen. There might be some desserts that are like, oh no, no thank you. Very popular. Yes, Rosemary. Tim Tams are very popular in Australia. I looked that up especially for you. I said, let me find a dessert that's unique to Australia. Ah, and Monica loves Tres Leches. Monica, tell Copper what that dessert is. She's never heard of it. Oh, Liz already has said what it is. It should be illegal. All right. Yay. So that was fun. A little bit different from our normal. I do you ladies like me mixing it up? Last week we had, what was it? Oh, so much on my brain. What did we do last week? Oh, we did quilt blocks, right? And you're welcome, Rosemary. All right. Okay, so now we have to get back to my 10 things for stress-free machine quilting. We talked about fabric preparation, piecing, pressing, batting, basting, stabilizing. All of these each have their own individual steps. If you want to improve at machine quilting, look at each of these steps. You want to improve at making a quilt, look at all of these steps. See which ones you're very strong at and those that you need to work on. And then evaluate that process and see what step in that process you want to start to improve, or maybe you need to get more information and learn more about it. Yep, she got it. Awesome, awesome. All right. So here is the first quilt. This is a quilt I designed using a half hexagon template. And Again, I washed the fabric. I starched it. You can see, I think, perhaps in the photo, that it's starched. And the reason why I starch is because when you're cutting, very little movement of the fabric. And when you're going to piece, very little movement of the fabric. And when you machine quilt, the fabric stays in place for piecing, for cutting, for piecing, and for machine quilting. It does not shift or move around a lot. You're going to have more accurate pieced blocks. When you base the quilt, it's going to likely stay square, more likely to stay square. And then when you're machine quilting, as you are moving that foot, whether it's walking foot, free motion, or ruler foot, you're not going to get that fabric moving and shifting to a new location as you stitch. Okay? Then, after piecing and pressing, sometimes you have to decide based on the pattern whether you can press seams open or to one side. And there's a whole debate around that. I've heard that by pressing seams open, you weaken the stitching. But there are some blocks where you have to press it open. If you have a star with all these points coming to it, if you don't press that open, you're going to have a little mountain, a little hill on the top, on the surface of your quilt. You're not going to be able to stitch through that. So you have to press it open or reduce the seam allowance. So you have to decide which one you're going to do. Yes, Lone Star blocks pressed open. Yes, Sherry, we always have so much to learn, don't we? Yes, Monica, starch is a game changer. Exactly. Exactly. So I'm skipping some processes because this is not a complete guide, but it's awareness of those steps. So after my top is pieced and I've done all the things that I need to do, fabric preparation, starching, my piecing, my pressing, I need to choose a machine quilting design. And I decided on this one that I was going to do a combination of machine quilting and ruler quilting, free motion and ruler quilting. And from there, once I have the design, I need borders and boundaries. Now, borders and boundaries, I don't know if another quilter is talking about this or not, or maybe they may use different terminology. But I create borders and boundaries. Well, before I do that, stabilize. I don't know why I keep forgetting that, Monica. Stabilizing. Once I've decided where I'm going to quilt, I need to stabilize. And in this case, I stabilized in the ditch around the diamonds. Around the diamonds and the zigzag. Okay? Then that left me freedom to stitch in between those columns of diamonds and zigzag, different patterns. And so as you can see from this photo, I stitched some ruler quilting in the diamonds with straight lines and ovals. And I'm going to use a hexi ruler, acrylic ruler, to quilt hexagon shapes in those half hexes, which make up a whole hexie, right? And I added some free motion feathers. All right, let's take a look here. So in the borders and boundaries, the first stabilizing was in the ditch. Then I created some borders and boundaries. Now you might be confused. What's the difference between a border and a boundary? Have you asked that question before? If you look at the section with the hexagon, this area gives you the biggest clue about the difference between borders and boundaries. So if you look at the gray area, remember I stitched in the ditch between the gray diamonds and gray zigzag and the colors, the yellow, green, the rainbow colors. After that, I created a border around the zigzag and the diamonds, a 1/4 inch border. Then I did a 1/2 inch border. So the 1/4 inch and the 1/2 inch are borders. The second 1/4 inch is a boundary. Okay? Can everyone see that? Let me know if this is making sense. Because if you look at the hexagon, the ruler quilted hexagon, I have 1, 2, 3 hexagons, then a 1/4 inch boundary around the hexagons. So that 1/4 inch boundary, okay, great. Yes, okay, great, Sally. Yeah, it makes sense. Great. If I did not put a boundary around the hexagons, the free motion fill that I'm going to put around it is not separated, at least in my opinion, sufficiently from the hexagon. I want the hexagons to stand out, 3 concentric hexagons. In order to do that, I need a boundary to separate it from the free motion fill that I'm going to include around that. All right, great. So we have borders and boundaries. Now I'm ready to fill that space with free motion quilting. I don't know if you noticed, look at the lower left hand of that corner of that image. What do you notice that's different in the diamond in that lower corner? What do you notice? Anyone see the difference? And we've had a couple of conversations about you ladies wanting to see some of my mistakes. Some of my mistakes I leave in my quilts as learning tools, and so this is one of them. And it's really technically not a mistake. I changed my mind. It was a decision change that you can start your quilting process, choose a pattern, and then decide, oh, that pattern's not working. Which did you do first for the order? I did the inside hexie, the smallest one first, and then went out. I used the seam allowance stitching in the ditch to start the next hexie. So from the inside out. No, I'll just show it to you because we're almost at 15 minutes already. I got more to show you. So anyway, it is that bottom diamond has feathers instead of straight lines and ovals. Initially, I thought I was going to quilt feathers in Yeah, that's a nice mixture of flowy feathers with a very hard edge design, hexie, a combination of the two. It does soften it. I was able to save that point, Sheila. Yep, it was very close. It is very close. I shifted it just enough, and when I trimmed my batting, I gave myself enough batting and backing, enough room so that I could keep that point. But look at the bottom of that photo. There are feathers in that diamond. And that's because I thought I was going to stitch feathers in all those diamonds. And after I did it, I was like, oh, I don't like it. It's too compressed. It's too tight. It's not flattering. And I was ready to take it out, but I decided not. I said, nope, I'm going to leave it in. So I left it in, and the rest of them are straight lines and ovals. All right. Yeah, it still looks good. And that's the whole point, Sally, is that when we start quilting a pattern and we think, oh no, I've made a mistake, don't rush to take it out. Leave it in, especially if you can continue. Change your mind, do the new pattern, and then look at the quilt with what you think was a mistake or error. And if you still like it and it doesn't stand out, or if it's a beautiful accent as a result because of its difference, leave it in. Okay? 1, 2, 3. All right. So in this, I had to practice my feathers. And I like to practice, as you know, number 10 on my stress-free quilting is practice, practice, practice. So even though I may have some success with feathers, I don't take it for granted, especially if I haven't quilted feathers in a long time. I will go and I will practice. And I will practice on a piece of paper first, always, or whiteboard. And if I know my feathers are going to take a special turn in a project, and are they going to curl on each other? In this case, this was zigzag. I will practice that type of feather. If I know my feathers are going to be big on the quilt, I will practice big feathers. If I know my feathers are going to be small, I practice small. Practice is critical for stress-free. Every single time we do that, it helps us build our confidence. Okay? And I needed to practice really tight, curvy feathers. And this is one instance where I said, let me practice that. And it's okay. Some of the feathers, the direction is not right. Some of the backtracking isn't good, but it didn't matter because it was practice. When I make those kinds of decisions while I'm quilting and it doesn't result in what I perceive to be a success, it's learning. It's telling me what I need to do next time or what not to do next time. Okay? So here's a close-up of the feathers in the hexie rainbow area as well as in the very tight zigzag area. This was another example of practicing free-flowing feathers to fill an unusual shape. Okay, who's preaching, you or me? Practice, practice, practice? I hope so. Okay. Lovely texture. Do you see the free motion quilting? Something else I want to point out when you are choosing designs for your machine quilting, you want to think about repetition. Repeating. I'm repeating feathers in 2 different areas, but the scale is different, but they're still feathers. I'm repeating the hexagon shape that's in the piecing, and I'm bringing it into the quilting. That's also a repeat of a shape or a design. And I'm repeating through echoes, echoing the hexagon shape in the quilting and repeating or echoing straight lines on the zigzag. Oh, thank you, Monica. So I hope you ladies are taking some notes. This is like a class in and of itself. You know, this is a lot of tips, valuable tips. Thank you, Sally. Okay, let's move on. So the free motion quilting. So I told you about repeating a design and technique inside one quilt adds to the drama. We have echoing that adds to the drama. We have repeating the hexagon shape, repeating the feather design, but changing the scale. The filler design also repeats the feathers. So you can take a portion of a design and repeat it in as a filler. So this filler are plumes. I've taken small feather plumes to become my filler design without a spine, just the plumes without a spine. But the important thing is that those plumes are echoed. There's a border around each plume to separate them. Hey, Joyce, I'm so glad you're here. How are you? Wonderful, Monica, taking notes. Awesome, awesome. Let's get a close-up view of those feather plumes. See how each of those kind of stand out? They stand out because of the echo. Or another way of looking at it is the same thing with those echoing hexagons. I had to put a border around those echoing hexagons so the hexagons could stand out. That 1/4-inch border at the end. Same thing with the plumes. You want to put an echo around those plumes so each one stands out. Thanks, Copper. Everyone say hello to Joyce. She's here. And my town, Virginia, she's an amazing long arm quilter. Nice to have you here, Joyce. I can be your guest lecturer. What does that mean? I'm not sure what that means. Let me know, Marcia. I would love to come and lecture in person. I enjoy our Friday night lives or afternoon, depending upon where you are. But I'd love to come in person. So repeat, 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 echoes. Can you see how this is all working together? Same patterns, but done in different ways. Echoes, changing the scale. All right, let's get an overhead view of our quilt. Echoing and borders and boundaries, creating repeating patterns, filling in texture. Oh, I miss you too. Miss you too. Joyce and I were in the same guild here in Fredericksburg, the Virginia Star Quilters. That was the first guild I joined when I started quilting. And I've learned so much from those ladies. Thank you, Copper. I'm glad you like it. Filling the space one step at a time. For those of you who are taking notes, if you were paying attention, did you notice how I was machine quilting in steps, stabilizing, borders and boundaries? Even the hexagons, the echo hexagons, that was creating borders and boundaries for the free motion fill. But each one of those was a quilting step, a machine quilting step. It was broken down into manageable steps. Thank you, Jody. Absolutely. I will come anywhere. I'll go to Australia. I'll go anywhere. You invite me, I will come. I just love sharing. All right, very quickly. Here's another example. This one basically has two patterns, circles and feathers with some straight lines. But what you see mostly are the feathers, and then you get a glimpse of the circles. Okay? This is one of my classes. It's actually called my Rainbowed Feather class. This is where I teach you multiple ways how to make a feather, 3 different feather types, and then we make this rainbow quilt, and we will then quilt it. Thanks, Copper. It's true. When we break it down into steps, and that's why I started off by talking about 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting. If you break everything down into steps, you won't get overwhelmed. You can just do one step at a time, right? Okay. So here is the beginning process. I use 2 layers of batting, and I stitched my echoes around the piecing for that circular feather quilting that I was going to do, and then I added my spines for the feathers. You can see the spines. But here's another design, quilting design change. You might see the straight line borders and boundaries that I'm creating for the feathers. And I added too many. I wanted it reduced, and I changed my mind, and you'll see that. You'll see that very soon. All right, here we go. Here's a close-up. Did I do that right? Nope, I wanted you to see this first. Yeah, there we go. So you can see I chose a direction for the feathers for them to come from the outside of the very edge of the quilt and then come toward the inside of the quilt. And I created boundaries for it. And I thought I wanted 2 lines, a straight line to define the space and then a boundary to stitch the feathers. Then I did some ruler quilting with circles. And because of the ruler quilting with circles, it looks like almost like piecing, like I did half of one color for the piecing and half of another color for that circle, but it's really just circles. No, Copper, I did the feathers back and forth. I go back and forth, but that's a very good question. You have to determine what works best for you. Again, I would take a practice piece and I would decide, can I go back and forth comfortably? Does that feel natural to me? Or does it feel more natural to go one side? You have to decide what works for you. It's almost like, to me, left-handed or right-handed person. What feels more natural to you may not feel so to me. Okay, so let me now reveal this one again where you can see, if you look closely at the circles, you can see where I removed the stitching because I decided that I did not like the 2 lines of stitching. So I removed the straight lines closest to the seam so I can insert circles. And I think that was a good choice. Changing my mind on that, I think, worked in this instance. I like the way that turned out. Let me go back, cover that. those circles, just add just a little extra something. It's not, a huge thing, but I think it's just right. Especially since it's doing this spiral design of feathers, and how important it was for the feathers to and the circles to end up on the inside of the quilt rather than starting from the inside and working my way out. Does that make sense? I guess. I hope. All right. Let's see. Got all that. Did I share everything? I guess I did. So, ladies, those 10 steps. Which ones are your steps? Are there steps that are included in your process that are not on this list? Which steps do you need to work on? Because remember, each step has its own process, its own steps. Do you need to work on your batting selection or your thread selection? What about stabilizing your quilt? How do you do that? What is your process for that? What about basting? Do you spray baste or pin? Do you use a table or do you do it on the floor? Or do you do it on the wall? Which is easiest? I've changed my basting process at least 5 times. I used to use 1,000,000 pins. Then I stopped doing that. Then I had a season where I only used fusible batting. Then I stopped doing that. And now I spray baste. So it's up to you. But each one of these steps, the more confident you are and comfortable you are in those steps, you know what you're doing, you know what tools you need, you will reduce your stress in machine quilting. It will just happen naturally. And you will enjoy the process. And you will get through your projects faster. When we have not decided, we have not made decisions about some of these processes, some of these steps, we can waste minutes, hours, days trying to figure out, how am I going to do that? I don't remember how I did that. Should I do it this way or do it that way? Do you ladies know what I'm talking about? Music. All right, music. I guess some of us would like music, an audiobook, a movie, something in the background to keep our feet happy, and music. Yes. And how about the company of friends? Sometimes it's nice to sew with other people, right? Wow, ladies, that was a lot tonight, and I'm sorry I rushed through the last bit of that, but I wanted to make sure that I shared everything, and I hope those last 2 examples kind of highlighted the machine quilting process and how I've created a system for myself that helps me achieve repeatable, doable, measurable success. And I have fun doing it. I just go on autopilot and I just have fun. So for Lois, she says her first step is selecting a pattern, then the fabric. That's true, Lois. I thought about that and I thought, well, this is really about machine quilting, not so much the quilt. It's what are our steps for machine quilting. I think you make a valid point. The process for selecting a quilt and then the fabric for that quilt is a separate conversation altogether. How do I select fabric for the quilt that I've just selected? And why did I select that quilt? Is it for a baby quilt? Is it a lap quilt? Is it a charity quilt? those play a decision in how we select a quilt. It could be the size, it could be the ease of piecing or the difficulty of piecing. You're welcome. You're welcome, Liz. You're welcome. My pleasure. But I guess that all of you ladies get the point that there is a process for everything that we do. And if we think about the process and narrow down our selection, figure out what works for us, the quicker we'll get through that process and the more we will enjoy it. Right? Okay, so I'm so glad you were here. And for those of you watching on the replay, don't forget, you can leave a comment below if you have any questions on YouTube. Don't forget to give this a thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe. That way you get notifications when I either have a recorded video or a live that's coming up. We meet here every Friday, 7 p.m. Hello, Gail. How are you? You're welcome. My pleasure. What else did I forget to mention? Replay, subscribe, thumbs up. Oh, don't forget, you might have friends who want in on this great information and the community that we are starting to develop. We're getting to know each other and have fun. So let them know too, so they can enjoy our company as well as get some great tips on machine quilting. And share this, the video, any of the videos you can share via a link with friends and Facebook groups, wherever you think it's going to be helpful to others. Don't spam any groups by any means. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying I want to be here for those who want help on machine quilting. And if you think these videos are going to help, share it. All right. Yes, lots of food for thought. That's the theme. Food, dessert. All right. Wonderful. And don't forget, if you have used any of the tips and techniques that I've shared here, send me a photo. I want to share it with the group. I'll share it during a live session and you can let us know what tips and techniques you used in your project that you learned during these live sessions or one of my recorded videos. And I'll be happy to share them with the group. I love doing show and tell. I think you ladies do too, don't you? All right, ladies, have a great weekend, a great week. Sew if you can sew. If you can't, dream about sewing. And I will see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend.